us. Thank you, Andy. So to start the recording, Stacy's going to join us. How cool is that? Anyway, my mentor in terms of understanding complex water hydrogeology, and always kind of helps me understand very complex issues. So I always appreciate that. Andy, you want to start, since this is going to be your swan song, I assume?
No. Anyway, I'm Andy Otto, Executive Director of the Santa Fe Watershed Association. And on July 15th, Maury Hensley will be taking over as the Executive Director of the Santa Fe Watershed Association. And yeah.
Congratulations to both of you.
Yeah, thanks for all your work.
Yeah,
thanks.
So I'm Carl Dickens, I'm not president of the Los Angeles Valley Association anymore, but I'm co-chair of the Santa Fe River Traditional Communities Collaborative. I'm vice chair of the Santa Fe County Water Policy Advisory Committee, and I've been working a lot with the stakeholder for the Pipeline Coalition stakeholder group. And we'll talk about stakeholder in a second. So go ahead, Ethan, you want to give us a little introduction?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ethan Mamer. I work at the Bureau of Geology down in Socorro. I've done a lot of work in the La Cienega area for the last couple of years, working on the long-term monitoring, and Carl invited me to check this meeting out. So excited to hear more.
Roger?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Roger Taylor. I'm working on the Coalition RFP stakeholder group. I'm the president of the Galisteo Community Association, the vice president of the Turquoise Trail Regional Alliance, and co-chair of the 285 Alliance, and I'm the president of the Ranchitos de Galisteo Water Users Association. Got a lot of hats.
Yeah. Kathleen?
Well, I don't have that many hats. I'm a long-term resident, well, long-term in my mind, of La Cienega, and I've been really interested in the lower Santa Fe River, and built a house here in 88, 89, and just active in our community.
Michelle?
Hi there, I'm Michelle Hunter. I'm the new Water Resources Manager at Santa Fe County. John Dupuy is my director, and I came from the Office of the Natural Resources Trustee, which is a small state agency that goes after polluters who have deep-pocketed polluters, I should say, who have damaged natural resources, and we get settlements to do sort of restoration projects around the state where the damage occurred. Generally, those are mining companies, and the federal government are most of those entities that we would work with in order to get settlements. Prior to that, I was the Groundwater Quality Bureau Chief at the New Mexico Environment Department for 6 years. And before that, I worked in the Bureau, the Groundwater Bureau, as a brownfields coordinator, doing redevelopment projects of contaminated, impacted properties. And before that, I was an environmental consultant in private practice, and worked for a couple of consulting firms in New Mexico, and worked in California. So that's a quick snapshot of my professional life, and I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much for the invite.
Mr. Schneider? You're on mute.
Sorry, what did you say?
No, I'm getting Bill to.
Oh, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Bill Schneider, I'm the Water Resources and Conservation Manager with the City of Santa Fe, and I manage most of our Bureau Reclamation grants, and including one for the San Juan Chama return. Thank you for having me.
Bob, nice to see you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So nice to see you again. My name is Bob Osborne. I work for the Department of Game and Fish, and I work with our private land programs.
Christine, one of my favorite people in the water area.
Thank you, Carl. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Chavez, and I manage the city's water conservation program. I'm also the liaison to the city's Water Conservation Committee, who works closely with the county's Water Policy Advisory Committee. So Michelle, it's really nice to meet you. I can't wait to start working with you. And there's a lot of joint work that has kind of been pending, awaiting your arrival. And so I'm really excited to engage those two committees as well as this committee or this group in some of the conservation work that we can do jointly.
Awesome, thanks.
Maury, welcome aboard, new executive director.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure what to add to that, but always delighted to connect with you all and learn from everything, all of the conversations and speakers that are here. So thanks.
Bobby?
I am with Rivers Run Through Us, and about 10 years ago, yes, over 10 years ago, I walked the length of the Santa Fe River with 2 other artists from the upper watershed to the Rio Grande, and 5 consecutive days we camped. And prior to that, there was an enormous amount of outreach to communities and individuals and groups and the city and the pueblos in order to be able to make this happen. We created a website, and the point of this was to illuminate our river. There were people living in Santa Fe who had no idea that the Santa Fe River actually went to the Rio Grande in good years. So that as well. I'm also part of the RFP Pipeline Coalition group, and I've been with the collaborative pretty much since the collaborative began, and very much a water advocate. And that's it.
Carol. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kier Correcchio. My wife Carol Cooper and I live in El Cañon, and we irrigate off the Rael ditch, which is circa 1718. We're downstream water users, and we share the acequia with the Bureau of Land Management, who purchased the ranch that our property borders. And I've been involved in the community of La Cienega for quite a number of years now.
Okay.
Carl, you froze up there a bit.
Jay?
I think he's asking Jay Christie to introduce himself.
Yes.
I have terrible internet. I'm not even sure if this is working. Okay.
It's working.
So yeah, I'm just sitting on my kid's bed because they're taking a nap. I'm Jay Christie. My partner is Kelsey Kohler. We purchased Ed Series property, which is just below the petroglyphs, and have about a mile of riverbank there on the lower Santa Fe River. And I am trying to catch up with a lot of people that's been here a long time and learn the issues of the water and where I fit in and what I can do and how I can collaborate with the communities involved.
John? Mr. Dupuy?
My name is John Dupuy. I'm the Santa Fe County Utilities Director, and hope to help address some problems in the region, and know we play a major part in it, so I'm glad to be here.
Amara?
Hi, good morning. I'm eating breakfast, so I had my camera off, but I also work with the Watershed Association. I'm the Director of Restoration and Community Outreach. So yeah, always learning and really interested in following all of this information. So thank you all for being here, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Letitia? Hi, Letitia.
Hi, sorry about earlier. Hi, I'm a recent graduate from New Mexico Highlands, and I'm working with Dr. Jennifer Lindline on the Upper Pecos on a water quality monitoring project this summer. So we were advised that this meeting was going on and that we would be informed and educated on some really important things. So we're here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Welcome aboard. Brian?
I'm Brian Reist. I'm a resident of Las Lagunitas. I'm not a director of anything, or I hardly belong to anything except the LCVA. I'm a volunteer firefighter with La Cienega Fire District, and just recently sort of retired, but that's about it.
And Ms. Timmons?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Stacy Timmons. I am the Associate Director for the Hydrogeology Program at the New Mexico Bureau of Geology down in Socorro with Ethan. And our agency has worked in La Cienega, La Cieneguilla, and the Southern Espanola Basin for many, many years, doing groundwater and groundwater surface water kind of interaction work. So I am just here to listen and learn a little bit more about what's going on and what some of the issues are. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Stacy. Bill, we're set and ready to go, so you can begin your presentation. And thank you for being here today.
Excellent. And I had no idea Stacy and Ethan would be on this call, so I had some plugs for them, interestingly enough. So kudos. I'm going to turn my camera off just to increase my bandwidth, and then I'll jump into my presentation. I guess, Carl, I need somebody to allow me to screen share.
That is Mr. Otto.
Help.
Andy, on the little green button on the bottom of your screen where it says screen share,
Yeah.
there's a little carrot on the right. If you click multiple users.
Yeah, I've done that.
And then you need to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah. There we go.
Does that work for Bill?
Let me try. I just got dizzy. Host disabled, so actually it's still not able to share my screen yet.
Okay, so I just did multiple, so let's give that a shot.
All right.
We're waiting. William Mee, who is the mayor of Agua Fria, joined us. Actually, he's the president of the Agua Fria Village Association and has a whole bunch of other titles as well.
All right, Andy, I think I'm in good place here. Let me fire this off here.
Yeah.
All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So, Carl, I'm not sure how much time you've allotted me, so I've essentially prepared two presentations. One, a status update on the lower Santa Fe River hydrology. And if time allows, and particularly since we have Stacy and Ethan, I would welcome an opportunity to kind of touch on a few things related to La Cienega if possible.
Sounds great.
Yeah, all the time you need.
As many on the phone are aware, the city of Santa Fe and the county have partnered to develop a project which would allow us to fully consume our San Juan Chama water, which for some folks on the call may not be aware, but it's water that is federal contract water that the city and the county own that originates from the Colorado River Basin. So as one of the aspects is the city is trying to embark on a NEPA process to evaluate the environmental impacts of such a project. And we thought it'd be very advantageous, particularly with all the community engagement and involvement, to sort of develop some baseline information relative to the hydrology. So want to kind of walk through where things stand and when this will be part of the public domain and sort of where the next steps are. And so let me just jump to a couple, if I may. Carl, I want to just take a quick opportunity to share with the group. I was able to meet with Melanie Stansberry and her grant workshop team, was it 2 weeks ago? And I really thought of this group because of so much of the Biden infrastructure funding getting directed to water and water quality projects, but also really designed to serve rural communities, that the hope would be through this collaborative that maybe there could be a common bond, that there are projects that sort of viable that we could proceed maybe to seek some funding if there could be agreed upon projects. So with that, I'm going to share, Carl, with you after this call, a bunch of information that she shared with me relative to grants. And so I thought it might be helpful.
Thank you.
Another sort of related, but not tied to this report, I wanted to provide an update because again, I'm trying to assist and work with this large stakeholder group on all things Santa Fe River. And so many of you may not be aware that the Army Corps of Engineers, via a contract with the National Guard, is starting out there right now, drilling wells and doing groundwater sampling, looking for the dreaded contaminant PFAS. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is how this site, the Santa Fe Airport, rose to the top on a nationwide evaluation as to basically going to a characterization. So basically, if you could see my screen, here's the airport, and here's the Santa Fe River, and we have a series of water wells that are sort of tied to a neighborhood down gradient in the county. I'm not sure the name of that neighborhood, but if you cross the Cayadebra Bridge and loop around, there's a series of new developments in that region. So I'm closely paying attention to this work and just wanted to bring this group up to date that we should be hopefully seeing some data in the next 3 to 4 months, and hopefully things are looking positive. All right, so the topic today is Lower Santa Fe River, and a couple key points there. This project is draft. It's going through a QA/QC step. It's on its 3rd iteration. It's cost 3 times as much as I would have hoped, but it's been an amazing effort. I'm calling it the compendium in the sense that we're trying to compile about 120 years of hydrologic data on the Santa Fe River. And ultimately, one of the key things that I wanted to sort of share is that this report is specific to the Santa Fe River. And so if you can see this graphic, one of the aspects that many of the stakeholders on this call and as part of the coalitions and collaborative are very interested in issues tied to the La Cienega, what I call the dendritic system that is a tributary to the Santa Fe River as it outlets and reaches the confluence right above La Bajada. And so one of the efforts that we're trying to establish is a baseline to develop some water budgets, particularly on the surface flows. And as I had mentioned, and I've had conversations with Robert Romero, William Mee, and many of the stakeholders of trying to gather information that would be relevant to a planning process. What would establish a baseline hydrology? What does the natural system look like? How can we improve conditions? Where does the water go? Where does it come from? All those questions. There's a litany of really good information. I'm pulling up some, what I would say, very key reports that that our report will be borrowing data from and referencing. But one of the things I wanted to touch on that's a new development for us at least, and I've been trying to get my hands on this report since I arrived at the city. And thanks to the diligence of Marcos Martinez, the city attorney, we were able to acquire a copy. As far as I know, even the state engineer no longer has a copy of the 1919 hydrographic survey of the Santa Fe River. Some very interesting information here. A very solid report. I think people that have not seen this, and I guess I'm speaking directly to William because I don't know if he's seen it, very, very valuable report that I think will really benefit this collaborative. So I will make that available. I'm scanning very old crinkly maps as we speak.
So, Bill, I have not seen that.
Yeah, I think you will really like some of the information in there, William. So the minute I opened it, I thought of you.
Thank you.
It really does bring some light to some of the matters that you brought forth with respect to Agua Fria.
Oh.
So trying to keep on track and on time. Then we've had more recent developments, particularly with strong technical leadership of the Bureau of Geology and some recent work with New Mexico Highlands. So we've pulled this together to try to develop sort of an understanding, a framework of the basic hydrology, where there may be data gaps, and then as part of our proposed projects, where there should be monitoring. So I just want to hit on a couple, 4 key points real briefly, please. So again, what in our perfect world, what we're trying to establish is develop some agreed upon facts on the hydrology of the lower Santa Fe River. This ties to the water budgets, the sources of water, springs, seeps, Paseo Real, stormwater, and ultimately where the water goes. Domestic wells, diversions on the ditches and acequias, seepage to groundwater. Ultimately, the goal will be, to establish a monitoring program for the lower Santa Fe River and support NEPA, but also to be expanded upon into the La Cienega reaches to better understand the concerns and the responses to shallow groundwater to many variables, including long-term drought, unmetered diversions, expansion of groundwater pumping, etc. And so one of the key steps in this process of this report is now that we have Michelle Hunter on board and John Dupuy has a strong hydro background, is we plan to sit down with this information, go through another round of QA/QC with our partners. And then I spoke to Reclamation, and our plan is to keep this a review draft to release it to the public, to all the stakeholders on this call, so that we can get feedback as part of this planning process. Again, can we agree on certain hydrologic facts? The only way that really, we see a win-win or the ability to improve conditions in the region is additional monitoring and establishing a definable water budget. So I just want to kind of provide a status. This report is in draft. It's going through QA/QC. Here's sort of the contents. So I wanted to kind of give you a sneak preview of what we're looking at in terms of the background, water quality, looking at basically where some of the depletions are occurring to the best of our ability, and ultimately come up with a comprehensive water budget and really a fate analysis, where the water goes, to create sort of a conceptual framework or hydrologic model that we can work from a monitoring standpoint, and moving forward in improvements on the river system. So this was what Carla had kind of thought, if I only had 10 minutes, what I would touch on. But if you would allow me 10 more minutes, I would really welcome a chance to continue on with the group if permissible.
Please.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So we've put a lot of effort and expense, quite frankly, into trying to pull this 120-year record into one place for the benefit of the group. And so one of the things we did working with the county digital elevation models, grid up the topography, to try to give a context of spatial dimensions of the system. And so if I may just point out a couple things. Here's the La Bajada escarpment capped by the Caja del Rio basalt.
Bill,
And
I don't
so-
know if it's still showing up or if I just can't see your share. Can anyone else still see it?
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
it.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I figured it out.
Oh, cool. You try to trip me up, John.
No, I was wanting to see it. I was like, where is that? I need to see that.
Well, it's funny, John, because you were sort of the inspiration of this visualization because of some conversations we've been having about aquifer storage, recovery, and groundwater monitoring, hence why I'm glad the Bureau of Geology is on this call. So anyway, this framework model, you know, going from La Bajada up the canyon, where we have, you know, measuring points from Ryan Mann's New Mexico Highlands master's thesis, you know, it definitely illustrates this deep incised canyon, and going through and up towards basically the what we're deeming the upper reach of the lower Santa Fe River, which is really more or less the Paseo Real water treatment facility, or 599. So here's a couple of key things I wanted to point out. I had mentioned this sort of dendritic river system. Historically, going back to the 1914 hydrographic survey, the 1962 Spiegel and Baldwin USGS report, you know, this system did contribute fairly significant flow to the lower Santa Fe River. As the Highlands research showed, during the irrigation months, unfortunately, this system is ultimately basically used to exhaustion, that basically it's disconnected hydrologically from the river. It's loved to death, right? And so, you know, one of the things we hope this lower Santa Fe River planning process sort of accomplishes is establishing why that is. Obviously, we're in a long-term drought. This is a very shallow hydrologic system. Its reaction to precip is pretty responsive and fast, but beyond that, what else is happening? And so we went to the state engineer's office and overlaid all the well permits that are in the system. And we've calculated how many depletions are taking place in this region. Now, one of the key things I think as a collaborative, if we really want to accomplish good things, and why the city is so thankful to have the county as a partner, is what can we do and what can we achieve to better improve what we'll call the baseline spring flow and perennial reaches of this dendritic system beyond praying for rain. So I had no idea Ethan would be on this call, but one thing I did want to sort of highlight, what I think is a huge success, and I hope this planning process continues with, is maybe an expansion of this program. I think it brings incredible value. I think this is an excellent report, Ethan, you know, and I've read it a couple times now, you know. But one of the couple of key points, and, you know, I want to kind of be an optimist here. I know that there's a lot of questions about the proposed project and what the impacts will be. You know, one of the things that I think jumps out to me in a positive way is historically, and it's very linear, surprisingly, was the declining groundwater levels in the La Cienega system up until 2012. And this is directly from Ethan's report. It's public domain. You can read it if you haven't already. But then we demonstrate that there's a stabilization, or in some cases, a rebound, an increase in water level. Now that to me is very positive. And, you know, we're seeing this throughout the city system, throughout the city well field, and certainly through the Buckman well field, that the city's decreased groundwater pumping, we're seeing a benefit to the community through recovery of groundwater throughout the basin, with some exceptions. So this is also a map I borrowed from Ethan, and it highlights where there are some areas, and I guess I clipped off the color scheme. So basically, areas in blue and green are positive. We're seeing recovery and rebound. Here's the Santa Fe River, here's Cienega, and here's that dendritic Cienega system. So where in the region, are we still seeing declines? Well, up in Agua Fria, we have a fairly significant groundwater pumping center. Down along the Cienega Reach, there's several areas that we're still seeing declines. Why is that? And these are some of the things that this coalition and this collaborative working with city, county, state, we need to address. And we view this partnership as a way to get to the root cause so that we could address these issues. Now, I like how, Ethan basically highlights that, well, in 2012, where we see this transition, what are some of the factors that took place? Well, certainly there's a significant decrease of pumping in the city. At the same time, thanks to the Buckman direct diversion come online, we were able to initiate the bypass flows of the living river. So we're contributing water to the river. At the same time, the county extended water lines and took the National Guard, the State Pen, the Turquoise Trail neighborhoods, all off of groundwater. And we're seeing immediate response in a very favorable way. So the question is, how can we continue to work in that direction? And what are the next sort of silver bullets to resolve declining flows in the system? Ah, darn, I just hit the wrong button. My apologies.
Well, I am so happy that my report is being read and appreciated. It often feels like I'm just publishing it to the world and no one sees it.
Yeah, right. All that hard work. It's nice that it gets read, right?
Your report is definitely appreciated, Ethan. I've read it numerous times. My first 6 months working here, I carried it around because I had to reread it multiple times.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, so I have maybe 5 or 6 slides. I wanted to take a crystal ball to gauge the interest of this group, the stakeholders, on where we see any common ground on where we could remedy some of these declining springs flows and river flows in certain reaches, right? So again, this is an estimation of the Paseo effluent releases to the Santa Fe River. Here's the total flow in acre feet per year, starting in 1971 when the Buckman Wellfield came online. And going through time, it peaked out. I'm having a hard time because I have this Zoom thing in my screen, sorry. Peaking in the mid 90s in terms of effluent releases. And then since that time, there's been a decline in releases because 2 reasons, mainly the city's conservation programs, reducing effluent, but also the non-potable reuse system coming online. But I've always made sort of the argument, and I think this would be a statement of fact, quite frankly, is that this is a completely unnatural system that, the city's been charging the lower Santa Fe River with effluent derived from what I would say not local sources, imported water, either from the Buckman Wellfield or more recently, the Buckman direct diversion, our San Juan Chama water. And the city's and county's proposed project, the San Juan Chama return, is looking to redirect the effluent coming out of a Paseo Real and bringing it back to the Buckman direct diversion for reclaimed water for reuse. And in the process, what does the lower Santa Fe River look like? So here's another sort of example of this graphic. And again, one thing I want to highlight is over the past 60 years is a significant expansion of domestic wells throughout the basin. And the question that I ask is, well, I've read the 2015 Cienega and La Cienega master plan, and there's discussion of potentially bringing water lines in. Could some of these groundwater pumping impacts be remedied through integration with the BDD, for example, as a scenario? And again, I'm only putting these out as concepts. This is for the coalition and the collaborative to work with us to address priorities. one things that, I've taken a peek at is what over time has the irrigation practices changed throughout the valley. Going back to the 76 hydrographic survey, one of the challenges we have is most of these diversions are not metered. We don't really have a good sense on the water budget because there's water coming and going and isn't measured. And the old argument, you can't manage what you don't measure, I think is pretty proven in this case. Now, one thing I find pretty fascinating is the evolution of land use through the lower basin. I really like this photo. Unfortunately, the resolution got hindered here, but we have aerial flyovers of the basin during the fall, which highlight, thankfully, where we have many native, cottonwoods, and they're bright yellow here along Cienega Creek. And then this, I'll call it unnatural riparian zone along Guicu Creek in the Lagunitas area of this massive grove of Russian olives, which is expanding by the day. They're phreatophytes, they use significant water, they're not native, but this is a demand on the system and it's not natural. And how does that concern people? There was a recent article in the Santa Fe. Go ahead.
Let me interject about Las Lagunitas. They're actually in the process of taking out most of those non-natives. It's a process that the Santa Fe Pewaukee Soil and Water Conservation District's involved with. So that is being actually addressed, but that is absolutely true. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Carl. And again, I'm asking questions, so I'm seeking answers from this group. There's so much knowledge here that we're trying to tap into to create a good product that we can use as part of this report. I did also notice extensive Russian olive growth and development on Bonanza Creek as well. So I'm curious if there's any work planned in that region. So shifting gears, there was an article in the Santa Fe Reporter, I'm sure most of this group read, about the groundwater flow and river flow down in La Bajada. So I just wanted to pull up this river gauge. Now this is above McClure. So this is on the Santa Fe River. This is in cubic feet per second, starting in January 1st, so 2022. And we have a pretty, what I call baseline, mostly from groundwater seepage, contributing flow to the river. And then we have our classic sort of peak flow from snow melt runoff. And now we're in our recession phase. And this is sad, man. I mean, I don't know how else to put this. We're down to about 2 CFS inflowing into the reservoir right now. Not only that, we had our peak occur in late April. I mean, historically, this would be in June. Anyone that is refuting what we'll call aridification and whatever the cause is, certainly we're living it right now in Santa Fe, right? I don't think there's any argument. But back to La Bajada, same scale, we're in cubic feet per second. January 1st, we have this massive flow, way what I'll call unnatural, contributed by releases from Paseo Real, again, statement of fact, at 9 CFS, right? Coming down to the USGS gauge above Cochiti, and it's steady. Why is it steady? Because our effluent releases are steady. It makes it down there to that gauge at significant flows that are far and exceed what is natural in the system, okay? Statement of fact from my perspective. Now, interestingly, April 15th, the river has this massive decline and effectively goes to 0. And so the question is, well, what happened? We're still releasing effluent. And we're hearing arguments that La Bajada is not receiving any flows and are having challenges. Well, coincidentally, the diversion gate for La Bajada is right upstream of the USGS gauge. So I'm going to infer, and likelihood is that the river is now being routed through La Bajada. The question is, what is their entitlement? How much water are they allocated? How much is being returned? These are all questions that ultimately, without having meters and measurements, it's very difficult to quantify what is equitable and fair to the various ditches on the system. I would have made arguments is that federal contract water really is, from my perspective, and this is my personal opinion, not really part of this equation moving forward. So how do we manage the natural system? And in that regard, again, I'm posing questions, rhetorical at this point, but hoping this planning process can work with us to develop some answers to these questions. Is the wetlands that were created below the Paseo Real through a series of grants to the tune of about $700,000 of restoring what was a field to a riparian zone through plantings with the purpose of improving water quality based on the pH, the level of sedimentation, and dissolved oxygen. Well, since we've introduced beavers to the equation relative to this riparian zone, there's going to be questions whether these goals are still being met by the wetlands. And how do we achieve getting water through the system to the irrigators with this sort of what I would deem hydrologic restriction through the various ponds and wetlands? You know, so again, these are just questions on how do we establish equity to meet the needs of the community. So back to my closing slide to the lower Santa Fe River is what we've embarked on is an attempt to develop 120 years of hydrologic data so that we could sit down as a collaborative and work through these questions and hopefully come to some answers. And so, you know, with that, I guess I'll stop sharing. You know, I want to just share with you that, did I stop sharing here? Okay. Is that, you know, speaking for the city, but also that I think I can share what the county's perspective is, we're very excited to have this opportunity to work with this group. You know, I would, you know, through this process would hope that we can work with the Bureau of Geology, with New Mexico Highlands, with many of the resources that could be available to us. And most importantly, and I just want to close with this point, never in our lifetime are we ever going to have a chance to seek funding to remedy issues from a water and water quality standpoint than we will now. So I hope we can continue to work well together and try to tap into those resources. So with that, I'll stand with questions.
Okay, folks, any questions? I've got a ton, but we'll wait and see. Anybody with questions? Bobby? You're muted.
Thank you. I put two of them in the chat, but one of them, and early on, you were talking about the airport and the contamination there, and you're talking about PFAS, the chemical, yes?
Yeah,
correct?
I would say suspected contamination, Bobby. We don't know yet, hence the study.
Okay, and then so the other question was, has the amount of effluent that's going to water the private golf course and the public golf course as well as parks, has that increased?
That's a great question. And, you know, again, what can the city bring to bear, right, to help contribute flows during needy times like the summer months? One of those, obviously, that we're exploring is demands on the non-potable reuse system. And so to your question, right now it's relatively stable. It's about 1,100 acre feet per year to meet the demands for turf irrigation of the various contractors. But we are working through various initiatives to make attempts to develop programs, conservation programs, which is so great to see Christine Chavez on this call, as well as Michelle. So through the Conservation Committee, through the WPAC, through other means, my hope is that I call it the purple pipe, is that we can put this purple pipe on a diet. And so I think that's something through this planning process that is a conversation we're willing and able to have.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Jay?
I've got a question here. We've been talking about the lower Santa Fe River past the treatment facility plant and how that's unnatural water coming in. I think in your slides there, it was showing the upper Santa Fe River, like that's not a continuously flowing river system that's contributing anymore either. So some of that water's being taken out, being used by the city, and then coming back through the treatment facility. I'm curious of just like how much water is the Santa Fe River getting upstream that's never making it back to the downstream, or what that looks like. And maybe your slide there, you were talking about snowpack and what the reservoir up there is getting. Did I see that correctly? Or because this is a huge conversation about the lower Santa Fe River, but there was a river there that's no longer running, and what's happening there. And maybe that impacts and doesn't impact, but I'm just trying to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, excellent. There's a lot of questions in there, right? And interestingly, the 1914 hydrographic survey even touches on where those perennial reaches are, what is feeding springs and seeps, Agua Fria being one, Cienguilla being another. So your question is going to be directly addressed in this report that we're working on, that I hope to have in your hands 3 to 5 months would be, I think, an attainable goal. So to answer your question, so on average, like right now, the Santa Fe River, the natural system is highly variable, as you're aware. The rate of consumption and the rate of diversion coming out of that river has significantly decreased, apologize. Hence to the point why we're seeing these water level recoveries. Through the conservation program, we're seeing reductions of consumption. So we have quantified, so of that 4,000 on an average year, how much makes it back to the Paseo Real, and it's about 65%. So meaning 35% is consumed on average, and 65 is returned through the sewer system back to the Paseo Real. It's a significant amount of water. And I remind you, and I think you're probably clear on this, is that our proposed project is only looking to redivert our San Juan Chama water.
Bill, I have a quick question. This is Michelle. Still, curious about the PFAS thing, like Bobby brought up. Did you say the Army Corps of Engineers is doing that study?
Yeah, so there was a national study done at potential risks and nationwide for the National Guard. So the Army Corps is the contracting entity. They've hired a local firm, EA Engineering, to do the study. It was reviewed by the Environment Department. So they're putting in a series of shallow groundwater wells. They are going to do sampling. And the reason is that there's been some reported storage and or usage of firefighting foams at the airport, at the old National Guard site.
Oh, at the National Guard site. Is that's the same as the airport?
It's the old National Guard site, Michelle. So there's now a new one that's moved off of I-25 on the frontage road. But
okay, now I get it. Because I did know about the study from being in groundwater in the Groundwater Quality Bureau. I didn't realize that this was the Santa Fe site that the old National Guard was. Okay, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up for me.
Sure.
Brian has pointed out that the mitigation work that's being done at Las Lagunitas has stopped. It was only done along the, along the creek, and it was stopped because there is some concern about nesting birds, and there is a significant number of residents of the HOA that aren't supportive of the complete restoration of that wetlands. I want to point out too, this is one thing that people understand, that's the second largest wetlands in New Mexico. And it obviously has been challenged for sure. Any other questions before I start my interrogation?
I do. Oh, good. Roger.
Roger.
Yeah, John, I saw you had your hand up. Did you get your question answered already?
Yes, thank you for checking.
Okay. So this may be a little too complicated, Bill, but looking thinking it through with some of the data you're presenting, there's a couple of data components that might be interesting to try and track, but I don't know how possible it is. So you got the 1919 report, which is pre-Paseo Real effluent release. So that kind of shows a status of the actual flow of water, which is coming through the snowpack and precipitation, basically. And, you know, looking at the recent reports on the OSC's website, the calculation they're using is it takes about 9 years for water to get through to actually be accountable. Once it's snowpack melting and precipitation coming down, et cetera, to actually showing up for usage. And you've got this tracking you're doing on effluent release and impacts on water availability in the river. And I'm wondering if there's any way to separate out the residual impact. If we know that, like, I think there's kind of like a general consensus that about 5 years ago, we started seeing this significant decrease in snowpack and precipitation, which means there's like 4 years more of water in the, you know, subsurface movement going on. Is there any way to put all of this together to separate out the effluent impact versus what's going on with the decline in actual water coming into the system that's not? Do you see where I'm going?
Yeah, it's a great insightful question, I think, and it really hits at the key point in terms of what establishes a natural hydrologic system. What is going to be our baseline, right, to plan and improve upon? We have made several attempts, Roger, to get at your question using the mod flow administrative model and doing particle tracking and looking at groundwater flow patterns and fluxes into the system, but we haven't done it. And this could be maybe one of our sort of objectives from the planning process, is to do it in a time series sense, to recalibrate the model with this new, what do they call it now? The new condition, you know, this arid environment that may, or climate that we may be stuck with here moving forward. It's a great point. But to close, to be brief, we've made our best attempts to try to compartmentalize a water budget in terms of sources to the lower Santa Fe River and sinks, things that remove water. So we'll share that with you when it's ready. You'll be welcome to comment, provide input. Again, we're trying to look at sort of a way to develop statements of fact so that we could plan.
Thank you, Bill.
Bobby?
So two things. One is a comment about the river. In 1919, I believe one dam in the upper watershed was already constructed. Is that right?
That's
and
correct.
Then the other one had not been installed yet. Is that correct?
That is correct, Bobby.
Okay, so that directly impacted Santa Fe. There were a whole number of springs that fed the Santa Fe River. Those dried up because of those dams. And to remember that that geology is still there, but the water isn't any longer. So just that. And then what would it take for the county and the city to I don't want to use the word force, but that's the only one that comes to mind, like to have all of the wells that there are in the city and in the county on monitoring systems like we have, you know, like I know how much water I use because I'm on city water, but people who have wells are really unaware of how much water they use. Some people will be very conscious of that. But if there's a monitoring system where you can see the numbers, oh, this many gallons went to whatever, something, how can that happen?
So there's two questions. I want to start with the second one first, please. And Christine, I'm hoping maybe you can interject a little bit.
I'm going to add to the conversation as well.
Yeah, so we've looked at, you know, Bernalillo County has a very comprehensive monitoring well program, including using domestic wells where there's data gaps. I still heavily advocate for the Bureau of Geology to lead that effort, and the city would certainly support that. There is a network of wells, but to the question Bobby's asking, well, how do we limit the depletions caused by all the wells out there? I guess, Christine, maybe can you touch on some of the conservation measures? I know the county has an ordinance to do some metering, which I don't think has really gotten off the ground. Is there anything you could add, Christine? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I might be able to address some of that.
Go ahead, Carl, please.
Well,
And I can add to it as well, Carl.
Yeah, John, you start and I'll follow you.
Perfect. So I do have a meeting at 11. I did have a follow-up question. I already texted saying I'll be late to the meeting, so I have maybe a couple minutes. The county's, its community development department, which was newly created, is working on providing solutions to that, implementing a program that provides solutions to what Bobby was bringing up, in knowing the amount of water use. And often I think our community is very receptive to making adjustments when they are aware of their impacts. And so it's mostly, from our perspective, something to bring awareness that will then provide voluntary change. And then from there, there's lots of options. But specifically in our community, we've seen very positive responses comparative to many other places. And the RFP for that program to be built was put out once and there were no responses, and it was put out again, and they did have a very positive response from someone they advocated or lobbied to propose on it. So they are moving forward with that, and I think that that's something that is a specific important component of the much larger picture that has, as Bill has alluded to, all these different players and pieces. And it's a very unique time because it's, the times are bringing us together because of all the impacts that are currently accumulating and occurring. But it seems like we have some very real solutions, but accumulating all the data to then make a cohesive plan that then is easily sold to those making decisions on what to fund becomes our solution and path forward, in my opinion. So it's a component and it's being pursued. I don't think it's something that gets stood up overnight. And of course, you always need good data. So that takes time as well. So it's on the right track, in my opinion.
So you gotta leave us in a second, John?
Say that again.
You have to leave us in a second.
Yeah, I don't know if it's okay to interject one question. I appreciate that. So, Bill, I noticed that you had the slide that had the surface watershed boundaries delineated, and then you had the overlay of OSE wells. As you know, like groundwater boundaries often exceed surface water boundaries. Did y'all include those wells that are in the same groundwater influence zones beyond the surface water boundaries?
For the Santa Fe River drainage basin, yes. Again, this report is focused on the lower Santa Fe River. For that graphic I showed you, John, was a quick and dirty retrieval of the OSC database and superimposed on that graphic, just to make the point. There's a lot of wells out there. Right. In terms of starting to differentiate attributes of the wells, hydrologic unit, depth, et cetera, et cetera. That's still work that needs to be done as part of the planning process.
Okay, great, thanks.
Just a point of fact, there are 12,000 wells in Santa Fe County. 1,000 of them are in the city and the rest are in the county. So I have a real quick question for Ethan. When you talk about the level of the aquifer rising, one of the things has been mentioned to me is septic recharge. Is that anything that can be calculated? Because given the fact that in the last 40 years, we've seen close between 400 and 500 homes go into the upper La Cienega area. Obviously, they are discharging water, and I'm just wondering if there's any way to measure that. Well, anyway, just that's the question. Septic recharge.
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever stumbled upon any reports that really look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to look more into that.
If I could jump in, the county commissioned a study led by Amy Lewis that tried to quantify that very question, Carl. So in other words, the demands on the well, and then the returns through septic, and then the water consumed through outdoor water use, et cetera. We've actually made an estimation using her methodology based on the number of wells in the various sub-basins of the Cienega system to estimate return flows based on septic. So that's one way we've gone about it. There may be others.
And I was just going to add to that the Sangre de Cristo, I think it's 2013 master plan, touches on that specifically for like the El Dorado area, because there is a significant number of septic systems there. And they were just trying to do mass balance, water in, water out calculations, high level, and they estimated 50%. I've also seen OSC documentation, specifically in certain permits that have addressed that, but that's very gross estimate. There's no real science behind it or validation and verification. But you can accomplish that by looking at certain contaminants, so like increased nitrogen related measurements. And El Dorado has done some of that work. So Steve King would be a good contact. And they've looked at the water quality component in what they pump, and to see if there is some pulling in of the flows coming from homes. So largely their wells are deeper and they're not pulling that in. But in some of the shallower ones, they have seen an uptick, and they were mostly the ones that were in the Ancha Formation.
Which are the ones that feed the La Cienega Springs.
Correct.
Correct.
Most intimately connected is maybe how I would say it, are in a human's lifetime time frame kind of thing.
Any other questions? I've got a few. And I think it's really important that we do address, Bill, how we can recharge or restore the springs in La Cienega, because they were key contributors. If you talk to the old timers, they remember times when the La Cienega Creek was running as full as the Santa Fe River. And we've seen about a 60% reduction in the Acequia de la Cienega's water resources in the last 40, 50 years. Yeah, and it's the residential wells, there's no question about it. And so that's certainly a key contributor to that. And God knows that John and I have spent lots of times talking about how we can bring water up into the upper La Cienega area. And that's something that is in process and something we discuss and we'll continue to push forward with, because that's so important. And I think what John said too is how you approach people who are going to be asked to go on to wells is something that's very important, because a lot of people just don't understand. They don't understand their connection to water and where the water comes from. And I think that's a really important thing for our area. And in all honesty, it's got to be done in English and in Spanish, because there are a whole lot of people who move here and just think there's just absolutely abundant amount of water, and they're going to keep using it as much as you can. And then we get into some organizational issues, and I am so envious of Christine Chavez and her conservation program. And it's something we would love to see if we can duplicate in the county. Now, the problem is with 11,000 wells, I've got 11,000 well owners, and being able to reach them is something that the WIPAC, or the Water Policy Advisory Committee, is really trying to figure out. And we have some ideas on how to do that. Part of the problem is the not misinformation, but so I'm going to go out to the county and say, hey, please, you got to reduce the amount of water that you use from your well. And they're going to look at me and say, well, how about the city? The city says that there's no drought, there's no problems, they've got plenty of water forever. And so that mixed message is something that becomes an issue. And I'm not sure exactly how to address it, because it is different. People need to understand there's difference between surface water and well water, obviously. But that is just an ongoing concern. Plus, and this is for Michelle, is we need more resources in the county. We don't have a Christine Chavez over on our side yet. And even if you fulfill that role, Michelle, we got to get you more money. And we get you more things that can be done to promote understanding of water. I mean, my crazy idea is, and I am so glad, Bill, that you mentioned the Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources, because they have to be involved. I mean, there isn't a better resource in the state in terms of understanding our hydrogeology, and certainly their knowledge is something that we have to tap into. But I had this idea that we start to section out parts of the county that have the same kind of hydrogeological features. And we start having water fairs. We have people come in and test their water, which has been done by the Environment Department. We had one here in La Cienega a number of years ago. We had probably 120 people show up. And that would be an opportunity to educate people about what their hydrogeology is and how they can contribute to saving water. And so these are things that we've got great ideas on the YPAC, but we just don't have a mechanism yet to move them forward. And actually, we have a YPAC meeting later today, and I certainly will bring this up again. But it's just that's an issue. And just as a side thing, one of the issues with the city, Bill, is we're dealing with three different entities with water. We've got wastewater on one side, we've got you in the middle, and then we got stormwater. And organizationally, that becomes a little difficult for us to figure out, who should we talk to, but that's an aside. But if we're talking about restoring the springs, there are steps we need to take, obviously. First and foremost is getting people on to county water. And that's something that can be done, I think, especially now with the kind of funding we have. We have county water that comes right to the corner of Los Pinos and the frontage road. And John and I have talked about one of the easiest things to do is just to go down that road and get the number of RV parks, trailer parks. And I'm guessing there's probably 100, 120 residents on that. And that would be a quick, easy thing to do. And then there are obviously the educational process of getting people to understand how they can contribute to saving their little community and the history and traditions of our community, agricultural traditions, by helping out by the saving water. And I agree with John. I think that people are understanding and willing to do that. And then there are people that won't, and those are the people that you really do need to enforce some controls on. I mean, I just drove through the community the other day, and I'm looking at all of these people who just put in small orchards. They put in, all kinds of tree and vegetation, and you just go, okay, they don't understand. So that's one thing. The 4 wells that the El Dorado District Water and Sanitation, El Dorado Area Water and Sanitation District, there are 4 wells in the Ancha Tsuki Formation that the La Cienega Valley Association wrote to them 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, and asked them to take those offline when the Canyoncito water line is put through there and they start tapping into county waters. That's in process. One of the other things is we have the Penn Quill treatment plant, which is the county treatment system. My understanding right now, they don't do anything with that water. So that's the kind of thing that we would like, and I've talked to John about this and he's really supportive of it, is to clean that water well enough you could recharge the aquifer. That's a simple, clean thing to do. Now, in terms of us in the community, we need to have more catchment systems. I would love to build on the Watershed Association's adopt an arroyo plan where we can start to slow water down and help that in terms of recharging the aquifer. And then the big one, this is something that this is where we get to stormwater flood control. That water that comes into our community after it's gone through the city and collected, it comes in just a wave, a huge wave. And there's got to be a way to slow that down and spread it out. And again, that would be an opportunity to recharge the aquifer. Wetlands restoration is something else that needs to be a part of the equation. But these are all doable things. And it's just a matter of getting the right people in the right situations and really forcing, not forcing, but really manifesting this opportunity to restore the springs in La Cienega. So that's my little spiel.
Carl, you left out the key component to all that. To achieve that goal, this group should consider advocating for the San Juan Chama return instead of opposing it. Because where you're going to achieve the fair distribution of water equitably through all of the scenarios you just laid out is by creating a new source of water supply for the community. And I know there's so much resistance from many on this call, but I'm hoping you will hopefully see the light to that very issue.
The collaborative has made has taken no position on that at all. And so that's, yeah, it's one of those things that this will kind of lead me into the pipeline coalition, unless there's more we want to talk to about Bill. So for those of you that don't know, maybe new to the process, is when we learned of the proposed return flow pipeline, there were a number of us that got together and started talking, and included, there's a 20 or 21 organizations, associations, and people that belong to the Pipeline Coalition. I'm the spokesperson for that group. And it was really, this has been a fascinating process. And I'm a process person. I think we've got a really good process. And so we were able to be involved in the negotiations of the contract between the city and county about the return flow pipeline project. And in that, we were able to get both parties to agree that we would have a stakeholder involved planning process. And we're moving along. And I'm really proud of the fact that this is a really constituent driven planning process. And that we have such great involvement in terms of figuring these kind of water issues out. And there's 4 of us today that are on the subcommittee that's doing the RFP for the plug in my computer, are doing the RFP for the facilitator who's going to be overseeing the planning process. And that again, so we have the contract that's been agreed upon. We have the support of both the county commission and city council. We had our preliminary meetings. We had 2 meetings with Lucy Moore, and that created a really strong foundation for what we're doing. And our subcommittee is taking that document and kind of filling in the gaps. And I really appreciate the effort that Bobby, Roger, and Jay have added to that, with emphasis on Roger, because Roger has a pretty keen eye when it comes to water issues. And for those of you that don't know, and I guess this was about 15 years ago when the YPAC was started, Roger? Yeah, 15 years ago.
That's about right, yeah.
Yeah, Roger and Adam Leegland started the YPAC. And so he's got a little bit of history and a hell of a lot of knowledge, and it's been great to kind of work with him. And I'm going to try and screen share. I've not done that before, And I'll see how I do. And it's this one right here. Andy, am I able to share?
Yes.
So this is it. This is the latest kind of, I've taken the notes that we've been working on, and I've put it into kind of a synopsis form. But this is the RFP subcommittee. Again, once this work is completed, it will be submitted to the county for their final blessing, and then it will be posted. And it's my understanding that our group will be able to participate in the selection of this facilitator. And again, this kind of involvement is something I think that is new to a lot of people. And we talk among ourselves that this might be a model for other communities to use, because we think it's really a good way to look at serious issues and come to a point where we really kind of understand and agree that on how we're going to move forward. And again, it doesn't happen without county and city support. And Bill, I really do appreciate all that you've done. We've had our differences once in a while, but in terms of overall, the commitment you have to making this thing work is something that is appreciated on this end. So we have the scope of work. This contract will result in a lower Santa Fe management plan that meets the needs of the city and county of Santa Fe, and which will be brought to their governing bodies to consider for approval. And so there's a series of tasks that go into it. And the first one is equitable community engagement. And this is pretty interesting, because what we want to do is make sure as many people who are interested and have some interest in the river are able to be involved. Certainly be able to be notified of what we're doing. We want a very transparent process, so the information will be available to anybody that wants to look at it. But we want to identify, contact, and establish communication links for each stakeholder, community, interested party, and sovereign nation with expressed interest in the Santa Fe River. We'll provide those contacts, including city and county staff, regular reports on planning process progress. We will solicit and encourage input, feedback loop, and comments from identified groups and individuals. As needed, we will make presentations as part of the planning process, educational outreach. And Roger, any of you guys who want to interject and correct me, please do. I did my best to take our Zoom meeting and put it into these notes, and I've updated some of the things that you suggested as well, Roger. So the second task is facilitation services for the planning process. This process should include and reflect the diverse community in the lower Santa Fe watershed. And this is provide a summary planning process. It's basically a continuation of task one. Provide summary of planning process for each stakeholder, community, interested parties, and sovereign nations. We've decided to use just community and sovereign nation. Community in the very broadest of sense. And we just feel like covers it better and try to decide who's a stakeholder and who's not a stakeholder. So we're using the term just community in the very broad sense, and then sovereign nations. Ensure each stakeholder, community and sovereign nation is heard, and their input and feedback is considered and appreciated. And this is something that Roger came up with, and I thought was really brilliant. We want to conduct 3 surveys of all these, of the community and the sovereign nations, and ask them, they're concerned about the river, what is important to them about the planning process, what is their expected outcome from the planning process, and what is unique about their community, and what should we know, what should our team know about them. I have to say that this is still in draft form. This is not in final form, but we'll continue to work with this, and it will be reviewed by the entire Pipeline Coalition. Literature review, I think we talked about this maybe earlier, but with Bill, but having a place to keep information, someplace official that people will have access, it's population that populating that scientific information base so that we all understand what's going on. This is a need to develop a process to officially retain planning documents and information in the county system. And this is done because the county is overseeing this process. County system identify the county staff who will oversee the process. As I said, this team feels this planning process may be new to county government, so it is important to clarify roles and assign responsibility. Roger suggested writing a white paper that would be available as a model for other citizen groups working with local governments. Technical assistance, and this is where the Bureau, I think, becomes really important, and others. Provide technical expertise related to natural resource planning with specific knowledge of river and riparian ecosystems in our environment. And one of the things this task requires is looking at what knowledge base we presently have within county, city government, and among us, I guess, too, and determining where there may be gaps in technical expertise. And that's when we need to be able to look out to outside experts for their advice and consultation. But this also includes working with county staff with control over budget to organize budgetary needs and expenses, equipment, website, data entry, resources for communication assistance, mailings, etc. We really do want to make this a broad-based effort and really get people to understand. Part of our push is to get people to understand the river as a living entity. And certainly it's hard to walk downtown Santa Fe and think that that river is a living entity, but it is. And what we want to do is make sure people understand that, what it was and what it can be. And then we end up with the lower Santa Fe River Management Plan, which Bill alluded to earlier. And it's one thing to develop a management plan, it's another thing to make sure it is funded and sustained. And that's going to be a really important part of this. Too often we see plans, and we can talk about the plan that was done for the wetlands below the wastewater treatment plant in I can't remember the year, 1980, I think. No, not that far back. But anyway, it was a plan that was developed by the Santa Fe River Commission and just got buried in the city bureaucracy and never saw the light of day. We can't afford that to happen again, and certainly as a group we won't allow that to happen. And then the very last of the issues that we'll be addressing at our next meeting. So it's again, it's a fascinating group of folks to work with. Some of the conversations we have, I am truly appreciative of being involved with. So that's kind of a real quick update on the planning process. We're moving forward. We meet every 2 weeks. Our next meeting will be next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And we're just going to continue. We'll probably at our next meeting set a deadline for the when we want to get the RFP information to the county so that we can move forward with the posting of that document. Any questions?
Carl, this is Andy. I have a couple things. One, if you could take down the screen share so we can all see each other. And then two, William Mee has had a question, his hand up for a bit.
Okay, so how do I take the screen share?
Oh, up at the top, view options. Yeah.
There. Got it. William, you're on mute.
I need to hold off just a second. I'm getting my thoughts on paper.
Okay. All right.
Carl?
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Actually, Carol, we have a question.
Yeah, we just have some input. As one of the stakeholders, BLM, as the owner of the Rael Ranch next to us, we'd encourage their involvement because they're federal, of course, and they have a huge stake and have done many, many studies in conjunction with the ranch. And just last week, one of their contractors Southwest Conservation Corps was down here doing water quality sampling at the ranch. And they did this last, we
This is
can't
part of an
recall.
ongoing study that they're doing on the water quality of the river.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago. But we really encourage their involvement because it's a big piece of the lower Santa Fe watershed. They have a large share of downstream water rights along with us in the valley. So we just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, one of the problems we've had is just figuring out who to talk to at BLM. I know there's been like a shifting personnel issue, but if you've got contacts, let's do that. And we also need the Forest Service. I do have a contact for the Forest Service, so we'll definitely get them to be involved and at least notify them of what we're doing.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Carl.
Other comments? Roger, you got anything?
No, I
Oh,
think
Bill.
that was pretty good. I mean, one of the significant impacts are going to be the budgetary process, but I'm pretty impressed with the dollar amount that's been put aside for this support for the RFP, the facilitation and planning process.
So Bill, you have a comment?
Yeah, just what do you have an estimate of schedule? One of the things that we had hoped is through the collaborative would be to have, or I'm sorry, the coalition, is to have the Bureau of Reclamation present to the group and give a status update on the NEPA.
Absolutely. Let's schedule it.
Okay,
I mean,
so
that's something, all we've heard is it's delayed until late summer.
Okay.
As we've heard about the NEPA. And so we've kind of set back and not considered that lately. That would be really a valuable opportunity. Yeah, so let's work that out. We'll get them if they're willing to make a presentation.
I'll reach out to you separately to try to coordinate that then. Thank you.
Michelle, did you have a question? Guess not. Okay. Anything else about this? The planning process. It's pretty exciting. And again, it's driven by a bunch of people who are just interested in trying to work on improving what's going on with the river. And one of the things we'll be dealing with are obviously our legacy issues, things that have been there for a while that we need to attend to, and the wetlands below the wastewater treatment plant will be center of that. Okay, so the next thing.
Hey, Carl, I have good news to share with the group to that. I forgot to mention, is one of the appropriations that got rolled up into this congressional authorization for funding or upgrades to the Pasarial, in particular, the UV and the filter system. So Leger Fernandez's office has captured that. We've also are embarking on a replacement of the headwork. So a lot of good work being done at the Pasarial right now.
That's really good to hear. And obviously we want to look at other ways to clean water once it comes out of the plant. I mean, we're looking at things like the constructed treatment wetlands. We really do want to see what we can do to get clean water, a steady certain flow of clean water in the river.
Yeah,
So,
I had reached out to Erin English regarding further exploring that concept, since I know the collab has been advocating for it. So I'm waiting for her to get back to me with some specifics. So we're looking into it for you.
okay, cool. She's a great resource without question. Now, one of the things we talked about is just stakeholders or contacts for all of the groups. And so we'll be reaching out and making a very concerted effort to get as many people involved with learning about what we're doing as soon as we can. But I also want to do a quick update on the story of the river, the videotape project that we're putting together. And this is done by a friend of the community, Duncan Sill, who I've known for at least 20 years. He's helped us with the community planning. He was part of the county's economic development team. And he has volunteered basically at no charge to do a story of the river. We're in the process of identifying people who will be interviewed. And we're really trying to tell the story of the river from a new, old, and general perspective. And what's really nice about Duncan is he has experience in this area. It'll probably be a 20 to 30-minute film, conversations with people along the river. We expect to start doing the interviews probably mid to late July into August, and with the plan of having it available to the public by November. And I have to tell you, he's a professional. We've already, Felicity and I've been working with him. And so I think we're going to put something together that I think we'll all be proud of. It'll be an opportunity to really kind of tell the people in the world around us what the river is all about and what it means to people historically and currently. So how are we doing for time? We're doing okay for time. And I have actually lost or misplaced my agenda. And I'm trying to figure out what I've got doing.
That's okay, Carl. You can just make your own agenda.
What now?
You can make your own agenda. Don't worry about it.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, let's do that for a second. I do remember that we had Watershed memories and moments, right? Now this has to do with Mr. Otto. And I'm trying to think back to when we the collaborative actually started, and I'm pretty sure you were at that meeting in Espanola, were you?
No, that was Felicity.
Oh, that's right.
And that's how she became the co-chair.
Right.
And
but that was
friends.
that had to do with the a proposed restoration that was going to go from the wastewater treatment plant down to La Bajada, that the Forest Service was going to fund. And so the Forest Service had a meeting up in Espanola. I know that. William, were you there? Wow. So I know that Jose Barrel Lopez and I were there. A representative from the Wild Earth Guardians. And what came out of that meeting is the fact that there wasn't as much community involvement or support for what the Wild Earth Guardians, and this was the previous administration of the Wild Earth Guardians, what they were proposing. And that really started the ball. And when did the Watershed Association get involved? Pretty early.
Well, sure. That Felicity was the vice, the co-chair with you. When I came in 2014, so at least 2013 or 2012.
All right. Well, I just want to say now that Andy is going to be leaving us, and I want to make sure you're not leaving us. So we want to make sure you're welcome to you have a permanent invitation to any of our meetings if you stop in and want to learn what we're up to. And I just want to say how much I have appreciated Andy and the Watershed's involvement in what we're doing. He's always been like the bright light, the clear thinker, and truly in caring about what happens with the river from one end to the other. And I just admire him for that. And there are a group of us that are going to have him take him out to lunch in the next month or so. When Felicity gets back, we'll set that up. It's going to be at our old stomping ground, Sunrise Springs, which is where we had kind of the every other month non-formal gathering of people from the collaborative. But I want to thank you, Andy. You've done a lot for us, and the programs you put into place are something that have long-term lasting effects. And we appreciate who you are and what you've done for the river and the watershed. So thank you very much. And if anybody else would like to comment, please do. Bobby.
So Andy, your your integrity, your sense of humor, your compassion, care for watershed, how you very, I don't know, very organically brought the arroyos and the, and all of the various different parts of what you have added to our knowledge of our watershed. How you have done that over the years has been I so appreciate it. And I think about a meeting that I had with you when Amy Pilling and I had brought in the project to use fungi, mushrooms, to work on remediating the soil below the wastewater treatment plant, and how you said you have to put the science in it, Bobby. so that was, and I went, oh, I'm not a scientist. But we managed to come up with a way to say it, especially mainly with Amy's input. But that, that is an example of how you have worked with me, and I'm sure with others in the group, in bringing learning to me, and to expand our view of everything, of our water. So thank you so much. I'm gonna miss you.
Oh, he's a pretty good guy.
I'm not leaving the planet, you guys.
Roger, go ahead.
So I want to echo a little bit of what Bobby said. Andy, you and I and William have had meetings for over a number of years when I was leading the Santa Fe Basin Water Association. And I will say that going back probably 8 years ago, when we first had our first meeting, your knowledge and your sort of large picture approach stimulated me to really get to know, start doing a deep dive of trying to understand what the water situation here is and how it's fed and where it goes and the issues with it. And having been involved in city politics and pretty much more county politics on trying to get things done, trying to get resolutions passed. I think of the 2-year process to get the water policy advisory thing done with Adam Leyland and with the county commissioners and things. I just have a lot of admiration for what you have accomplished. The Santa Fe River, the agreements you've gotten on the release of water, keeping it viable, and working within all of these groups in a non-aggressive, non-confrontational way, it's pretty impressive. And so I just want to capture that because I think it's a great way to model how to work with these political organizations and our leaders, because they do mean well. Sometimes we just have conflict, but you don't, if you get embedded in the conflict, you don't get anywhere. And I think you've been a great model for that. And so I just wanted to note that.
Dean?
Did you say?
You have your hand up.
Did you say Christine?
Yes, I did.
Oh, well, I mean, if you're going to call me to the table, I just praised Andy all morning long on the radio show, but yeah, I love you, Andy. It's been so great working with you. I've learned so much, but I'm so happy you're not leaving Santa Fe. And yeah, I'll stop there.
So I get to throw in something here in the last couple of minutes, not too long, but there was something that was said earlier about the collaborative or the coalition. And the biggest thing with this group has been the collaborative nature of it. And I remember Darren kind of challenging me with that, Darren Munzberger, probably 7 years ago, you know, and he's saying, no, we like to think we're collaborating, you know, and he was absolutely right. I mean, I think of the conversations that have come in and out of this collaboration and the people is phenomenal. And so I think keeping that in mind is a biggie, and especially as other groups like the coalition and the city and the county, as they move forward on different projects, that collaborative nature and history of this group will serve the people and serve our watershed, frankly. And that's really cool. So that's something to throw in.
You've been an important part of that.
Well, I just take notes.
Okay. William.
Well, you know, it was kind of a shocker when I found out that, you know, Andy was gonna retire finally. And, you know, he's meant so much to Agua Fria Village because, you know, he's come to our meetings. His organization has funded our Santa Fe River Blessing. You know, it just goes on and on and on. And, you know, he would call me up and I would call him up, and, you know, it was just so great. And the latest thing he called me up on was how to do some farming. And so I was like, what am I going to tell him? but we had a really good chat, and maybe he'll become the gentleman farmer. And, you know, if that's the case, I mean, water's more important than ever to him, you know.
Pretty cool.
But I want to end with, I think it's something that Bill said, and maybe John reiterated it, but this really is a moment when we need to do these kinds of things, that we really need to be more active in terms of addressing long-term water planning. And this is part of that, and an important part. And the collaboration, I mean, it's an evolutionary, it's evolved, it's changed, but the amount of water knowledge of this group when we get together is substantial and important, and something that we do of our own free will. We don't have anybody over our heads telling us what to do, but we come to these meetings and participate and let our voices be heard, and then listen to other people, and we learn and we gain. And again, Andy, you've been an integral part of that, and we're going to miss you. But seriously, if you want to listen into what we're doing, we'll be sure to keep you as part of the email list to make sure you receive notices of what we're doing and what we're up to. Okay, folks, anything else today? Again, this is my favorite group to get together, although the subcommittee's got pretty interesting lately. That's been a lot of fun. Bill, deeply appreciate your involvement today and your commitment. Bobby?
One question for Bill. Bill, can I also get a copy of the 1919 hydrology survey?
Absolutely. I'm going to make it available to everybody. I think it's a very valuable resource. So probably within the week, Bobby.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
And so, Bill, how are you going to do that? Are you going to have it on the city website, or are you going to do a mass email?
It's going to determined by how big the files are. We're scanning the maps now, John, all the ditches. It's a compendium in itself.
Wow, that's great. Where did y'all find it?
Yeah, that is a story that will take us through lunch, but I have my greasy mitts on it now.
Nice. John, you want to say anything?
Conversation.
Okay. Well, Michelle, welcome. I think you got a little taste of who we are and what we're doing. We're all headed, I hope, in a good direction. Thanks to all of you, as always. And thank you for caring about water in New Mexico. Ethan, good to see you. Maury, welcome aboard. So look forward to continuing to work with everybody. And I really want to thank Bob Osborne, because the Game and Fish are going to play, I think, an important role with some of the things we're going to do downstream. And to have that kind of expertise as part of the conversation is something that is deeply appreciated.
You can't leave like that, Carl. Are you hinting at maybe moving the beavers?
Not sending anything with anything right now. I will not get into that discussion, but we need to look at all options and opportunities in terms of water flow. How's that?
Excellent.
Very non-discreet.
Carl, could I just say something real quick? You know, our professor, former state historian, Hilario Romero, is actually publishing a book on the Santa Fe River. And he says he's very close to finishing it. And, you know, it'll have those 30 springs in it that were historically encountered by Spanish explorers. And, you know, so I mean, you know, that would be really a good resource to have for us. So he was a little tight-lipped about it, but, you know, I think that's maybe the publishing problems that come up with that.
He's a member of the collaborative and participates pretty regularly, actually. Is a great voice. Okay, anything else? All right, folks, you guys have a good Thursday, good weekend, and we'll see you in a couple months. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.